the very critical responsibility bestowed upon them by the Constitution and our standing orders, Mr. Speaker. This committee, Mr. Speaker, has proven over the last few sessions of this Senate, Mr. Speaker, that when called upon to stand up for devolution, they do so with much zest, Mr. Speaker. And I want to appreciate the members of this committee, all those that make the committee sittings, while Senator Sifuna was a bit more generous with his platitudes, celebrating the committee. I have curiously noted, actually, that if you look through the Budget and Finance Committee, as Majority Leader always, Mr. Speaker, I'm keen to see who are the members that sign on to the report. It gives you an idea of who's present in these meetings. You will consistently note that actually it's almost on or about the same people, about 5 or 6 out of the 9 that are members of this committee that do this work. I celebrate those members, Mr. Speaker, and the leadership of Captain Ali Roba, Mr. Speaker. This proposal, I'll go straight to the recommendations, Mr. Speaker, because I don't need to repeat many of the brilliant things that have been said by colleagues who have spoken ahead of me, other than to appreciate, Mr. Speaker, that the findings of this committee are quite impressive, that they have been able to pinpoint the exact pressure points for our counties, Mr. Speaker. You know, even without a fight of saying we need to add money here and there, you need to first identify allocations that are already set out in law, that is already specified and said X amount of money go to our counties, like the mineral royalties, Mr. Speaker. It's defined in law already, so there's nothing to fight about. So sometimes you look at bills that come from the National Assembly and you wonder. I know for a fact, because I served as Chair of Staff Welfare, Mr. Speaker, that Parliament is made up of perhaps the most competent personnel and human resource you can find in this republic and even beyond, Mr. Speaker. So what happens when you serve in the National Assembly? Because I know our staff are diligent. When I served in committees, there are many things that, for example, we'd wish to insert into bills. But our clerks, the legal persons that serve with us in those committees, they will expressly guide us and help us appreciate that this is outright unconstitutional, this is outright against the provisions of the law. So when you find a reduction to royalties that have already been collected, 1.06 billion, and proposed, and it passes, and that committee that consider this bill has a lawyer, has a legislative drafter, Mr. Speaker, has a clerk who understand all these things. No, I'm not focused on the political class, Mr. Speaker, because I know what happens in committees sometimes, but just thinking through provisions of law that are already set out. Because, Mr. Speaker, and it's important that members appreciate, conditional, additional, what is it called, the bill? The county government's additional allocations bill is a brainchild of this House. About 2 years ago, that previously we used to do $1, and you'd have separate divisions for additional allocation. But we felt that it was important, Mr. Speaker, because some of these allocations come midway through the year, that we have a standalone bill that helps Senate and institutions of oversight, Mr. Speaker, to have a more clearer view of both conditional and unconditional grants to our counties, Mr. Speaker, that we felt were getting lost in between the other broader allocations, county government's allocation to our counties, Mr. Speaker, where there was a better focus. In fact, Mr. Speaker, pointing out the errors in this bill, the very glaring ones, like the one I've spoken to, justifies the thinking that went into doing a separate bill by the Senate, Mr. Speaker. Because believe you me, if we were still doing $1 that has both the shareable revenue and the conditional and unconditional allocation, Mr. Speaker, as was the case previously, Mr. Speaker, then it will be difficult to pinpoint some of these errors. But the Senate made a wise decision, very wise one. And reading through this report, Mr. Speaker, you appreciate actually why it was important for us to have this separate distinction between shareable revenue and these conditional and unconditional grants to our counties, Mr. Speaker, because it is only when we begin to deal with this item by item, you know, Mr. Speaker, that you can pinpoint the shortfalls and point out specifically that we passed a law that, for example, set out once we have made a decision that we are setting up these community health promoters, for example, Mr. Speaker, it is defined and it is known. It's human resource. These are human beings. They are people with families. They have genuine expectations. They believe that they have a job. They are going around our villages treating. In fact, these community health promoters, Mr. Speaker, much as we do not remunerate them as well as we should, Mr. Speaker, I can give testimony that I know that those that I know in various villages in our communities, Mr. Speaker, do even more work than some of the medical professionals, Mr. Speaker, because they are visiting the 100 households that were allocated to them. Therefore, because it is already known what their salary is, it is already defined what the number of those CHPs are per county, shouldn't it be rather obvious what their allocation is after factoring all the other additional costs that come with having them at their place of work, Mr. Speaker? And therefore, sometimes, and that is part of the lack of fluency in the drafting of some of these bills, Mr. Speaker, that I continue to point out and challenge staffers and members of parliament like yours truly, who serve in these committees, Mr. Speaker, not to make our work so difficult, because these are things that are already specified and they are known. Therefore, they shouldn't even form a basis for argument, because we know what the exact number of these people are, and we should be able to conclude on them. I like, for example, Mr. Speaker, that it has taken this committee, Mr. Speaker, just to point out and remind the whole country that when we made the decision in 2015 to build county headquarters for those 5 counties, I think Isiolo, Lamu, Nyandarua, and I don't know which 2 others, Mr. Speaker, we were very clear about how much we were going to give them, Mr. Speaker, and it was expected because at that particular time, there was a genuine understanding, a general understanding amongst all of us that served in Budget and Finance Committee at that time, Mr. Speaker, that because these counties did not have provincial or divisional or district headquarters at that particular time, we were going to give them a boost, but we were not going to turn the whole country to be sponsors for them, as such that if you are unable to conclude on building this project, like I've seen the case, I don't want to mention the specific county, Mr. Speaker, because as majority leader, people may interpret that I have something against a specific county, but that county is listed here. And I like that the committee has pointed out that that county has taken more than what is their projected share, Mr. Speaker, and therefore we cannot give them the 78 million shillings that is being projected. Let them find within their resources, Mr. Speaker, because the rest of the other 4 counties, I want to believe, Lamu, Isiolo, and the rest, have concluded with the allocation that we gave to them at that particular time, and we should avoid this temptation. It points out, Mr. Speaker, again, to even the drafters and the people that go into drafting some of this legislation, that perhaps either out of corruption, Mr. Speaker, or because of the fact that you come from a particular county, that you just want to obviously violate the law. If you read the report, Mr. Speaker, of the Budget and Finance Committee of 2015, I know it, Mr. Speaker, 2015-2016, I know what we appended and the allocation that was given to each county. If you have exhausted your quota, Mr. Speaker, that's it. There is no reason why we should be burdening the rest of the country to complete a headquarters for you, Mr. Speaker, more than 10 years down the line after the advent of devolution. And therefore, I agree with the proposal that this committee is making to deny that allocation to that particular county. These specific programs, and I wish Senator Moses Kajwang was here, but I know members of PAC are here, and Senator Osotsi, your member here, because your committee actually looks into this special allocation and funds. This so-called loan allocated project fund, donor-funded projects, Mr. Speaker, in our counties. Danida, Floka, Sijui KAV, Ward for Agriculture, and they are increasing by the day, Mr. Speaker. If there is an avenue where public finances are being lost, Mr. Speaker, in our counties, it is these particular projects. And therefore, Senator Osotsi, if you and Senator Moses Kajwang do not lead us into establishing a mechanism through which we can ensure that citizens get value for money out of these loans, Mr. Speaker, then we need to disband those committees of yours. Because I do not know of a senator who cannot today go back to their county and point out under these funds of either Floka, the ones for Danida, the one for urban, for those that represent counties that have got urban settings for them, where this money is not wasted. where you find a kilometer of road is being built for more than 50 or 60 million shillings by a county government, Mr. Speaker. What nonsense is that, Mr. Speaker, that you're allowing as a county? Mr. Speaker, I really hope that by the time we get to the next session of the Senate, Senator Osotsi, Senator Moses Kajwang, your committees will actually lead us into ensuring that we have specific ways through which we ensure that these donor-funded projects in our county, citizens get value for money.
Senators, Senator Professor Jenner, may the majority leader be heard in silence, please.
So, Mr. Speaker, it will be important, and I like what the Budget and Finance Committee is pointing us to us, like this latest project, the one for Kenya Agricultural Business Development Project, you know, the one for putting together, community projects for young people in agriculture. These things have been there since I was a youth. Mr. Speaker, I don't think I'm a very good example, probably even since Senator Uhuru was a young person, Mr. Speaker. These interventions in agriculture, Mr. Speaker, if they were achieving the desired result, Mr. Speaker, then we would say that carry on. But the problem is, us as a Senate, we are not involved in the design of this project. Yet, we are brought in as rubber stamps at the tail end of the program, where we are just supposed to append our signatures and say, a program has been put together, therefore we can send funds to the counties. If you ask many of these senators that are here to give an account of their experience of these projects, the way they have been conceptualized and designed, Mr. Speaker, there would be more value for money in some of these grants, Mr. Speaker, despite the fact that they are specific to the projects that they are supposed to do, like these climate funds, Mr. Speaker. You find this is part of the money, if you don't know, like the FLOCA funds. It's part of the money that many of our governors continue to run projects similar to what used to be known in the national government as Kazi kwa Vijana, where they get their supporters and bloggers, you know, these people that they use to insult senators, so that they work with a slasher for 2-3 days and they disappear with 5,000 or 10,000 shillings per day, Mr. Speaker. Open, blatant corruption. Yet we account for these funds, colleague senators. It is time that we become also a bit more cautious in these so-called donor-funded projects. And you know, Mr. Speaker, they are very intelligent in how these projects. You know, those guys, the so-called treasury mandarins, are very intelligent. They know when they splash the catchphrases, World Bank, IMF-funded project, because of, I don't know, it's neocolonialism, Mr. Speaker, or whatever the issue is, we get easily excited and say, oh, if it is World Bank, perhaps this project have been properly thought about, let us just approve the funds. I want to believe, Mr. Speaker, that it is possible for the Senate of the Republic of Kenya to first put a stop to these so-called conditional and unconditional grants, Mr. Speaker, until such a time that we first see the feasibility report of these projects across our counties, Mr. Speaker, because, you know, these are monies that we'll eventually pay for. It is not free lunch. It is billions of shillings, Mr. Speaker, that eventually accumulate and stockpile as part of our national debt, Mr. Speaker. Yet, if you compare how that money is being used, Mr. Speaker, you know for a fact that many of them are just wasted, Mr. Speaker. And therefore, as a House, I want to, while I agree with the proposal to top up the funds, Senator Roba, there must be better accountability mechanisms of this project, up to and including not just necessarily the amounts of money that are being dispersed, Senator Roba, but the conceptualization of the project itself. I know what is best for the people of Kericho. That's why they elected me to represent them here as a senator. And so on for all the rest of the senators that are here. I don't see how somebody can sit in Washington and design a project that we're just supposed to implement it as a turnkey project, Mr. Speaker, and expect that it will work miracles for my people. The Senate of the Republic of Kenya must have a better voice on these particular projects, Mr. Speaker, and including their conceptualization, what is the costing, Mr. Speaker, and how it gets. Lastly, Mr. Speaker, it's just a concern. Let me go to the specific clause. Part H, Mr. Speaker, of the report of their last recommendations, where the committee is proposing to us that we amend clause 5.6 to provide that all additional allocations to county governments under clause 5.1, 2, 3, and 4 shall be transferred to the respective CRF in accordance with the disbursement schedule approved pursuant to Section 17 of the Public Finance Management Act, Cap 412A. What made me curious about this, Mr. Speaker, is the fact that I thought this is already provided for in law. But I have been in this house long enough, Mr. Speaker, to know that there is nothing that makes it sway into legislation out of idle venture. Are there perhaps specific counties, Mr. Speaker, where these funds or these additional allocations, Mr. Speaker, are being directed to without benefit to the rest of all the 47 county governments, Mr. Speaker, as such that Senator Roba and his team would wish that we provide this amendment to clause 5 and 6 and ensure that there is a direct transfer to the specific CRF of a particular county? I thought there is a general application, and maybe I should have asked the chairperson of this committee in private, but help me to wonder aloud with the rest of senators so that they appreciate. You know, Mr. Speaker, it will be important for senators to know that before the advent of this particular bill, one of the grave mistakes that used to happen, Mr. Speaker, is that when it was only Treasury on their own making the decision of which counties to benefit from conditional grants, Mr. Speaker, it was specific counties that used to benefit from this particular project. And we felt that it was unfair to the rest of the devolution family, because we believe in the principle of equity, that all 47 distinct county governments are equal before the law, Mr. Speaker. And that is why we moved the House, and the House agreed with us that let this House be the principal organ that does the distribution of resources, so that today, if we run a project in 5 counties, Mr. Speaker, we can justify to the rest of our colleagues that the other 42 have missed out, but somehow, some way, in the next financial year, you will be beneficiaries. That never used to be the case. And therefore, I get concerned, Mr. Speaker, when we have this amendment, and I hope Senator Roba can convince me before we take the vote on why it has to be specified that into the CRF accounts of the specific counties without listing which those particular counties are. Therefore, with those very many remarks, Mr. Speaker, I beg to support our committee and appreciate them for the very good work that they've done. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. Now, honorable senators, the youngest member of the House turns 81 today. That's none other than the Senator for Siaya, the Honorable Uhuru Oginga. Happy birthday, Senator Uhuru. Order, honorable senators. Thank you. Order, honorable senators, order. Order, honorable senators. Senator Oburu Odinga, the floor is yours.